REPL as if we could.
All right, thank you. So yeah, we've probably all been here, right? So this is a small Babashka script. It's obviously like when we run it, it's returning the wrong result. A classical off by one error. So yeah, let's try to fix it. Oops, another off by one error, so off by two now, and now we get the right result, right? And so Babashka is kind of fast iteration loops, like, yeah, what does it take, 22 milliseconds, makes this kind of process work pretty well and pretty addictive, right? And when it works well, it's great, because yeah, we don't deal with any kind of hidden state problems, and like our file system is in sync with the runtime state. And like I said, when it works, it's great. But yeah, when we're doing more complex things, then I think it might actually be better to switch to a REPL. And can I get a show of hands, like who's all using Babashka here? And leave your hand up if you know how to start a REPL in Babashka. All right. And if that's your main mode of development, all right. Cool, so starting a REPL is really easy. All we do is db nREPL server, grab the port here, and connect to it. And off we go. So then we can, like, we're gonna be using kind of two bindings mainly. Like one is for evaluating a form. You see the result here at the bottom. So we get the 41 when we evaluate the form at the cursor. And when we evaluate the top level form, for which I also have a key binding, then we're getting the 42, right? And yeah, we'll be using these two bindings the whole time, pretty much all the time. And so ergonomics are important for those. Like I use Command Enter to eval at the cursor, and Command Shift Enter for the top level form. All right, and now I'd like to explore remote API. And to do this, let's start with a small namespace declaration. I'm going to maximize Emacs here. And kind of the first thing I'd recommend when working with the REPL is work in the tiniest increments. So as I'm writing the namespace declaration, I'm already checking, does this evaluate? And we'll be exploring this endpoint. So now I also get completions. These come from the REPL. Want to hit this endpoint, so we need an HTTP client, again, evaluated in small steps. And let's do a GET request. This is the Studio Ghibli Films API. If you're familiar, highly recommend checking it out. So this should be Ghibli API Vercel.app/films. And let's make this a bit bigger here, 1 second. All right, so we get something back. And let's actually get the body here. Cool, and this looks, one sec. This looks an awful lot like JSON, right? So let's see if we can parse this. Again, bring in Babashka ships with Cheshire. So let's bring this in. And gonna just break this here. And actually, I'm not getting completions here, so I think I forgot to evaluate it. So let's import the namespace require. And now we do get completions for that. So that's just another thing. As our runtime is giving us these completions, it's really helpful to use that as a hint to pause when we aren't getting what we're expecting, and help us guide this working in small steps. So we're going to parse this. And this is looking pretty good already, but I think I'd like to have keywords. And as I go over this, you see here at the bottom, we can pass a keyword function, a key function. Let's use keyword here. Nice. And then let's look at the first thing here. Cool. And actually, this is now like when we see how long this takes. Let's see. So because we're doing a HTTP request, this is like taking 200, maybe sometimes 300 milliseconds. And yeah, I think that can be a bit or for stuff that's even slower, like the feedback loop is getting problematically slow. So let's see if we can factor this out into a function. And as I'm doing this, I'm not going to start writing the function definition right away. But a small trick is to start with a let binding that binds the first concrete parameter that we're going to call it with. And so we're going to pass this a URL and move this here, move the URL here. And yeah, it's still doing what we want. And now let's, or actually, yeah, I wanted to, yeah, I'm going to show this in a moment with an example that makes a bit more sense. All right, let's call this fetch, and this is going to be a memoized function taking the URL. Move this out here. All right, didn't slurp this in. All right, then let's try calling this. Cool, and then let's actually look at the runtime again. So the second time we call it, this is memoized and does fast, right? And all right, so back to exploring this again. So let's get the first element. And let's look at the keys.
It's already the first.
Oh, did I do the first? All right, that should go then. Thank you. So first element, keys, and then let's kind of see what's the title. All right, again, I'm not getting completions here, and there's a limitation of the Babashka end REPL. But this isn't a big problem. Actually, what we can do, I'm going to stop this REPL here and then ask Babashka to print its dependencies. And yeah, that's a list of all dependencies. Gonna just create a deps-eden with this, right? So here we have a deps-eden. These are the exact same versions that I'm using, and then I can start a regular JVM REPL. And now let's run this thing. And the title here is Castle in the Sky of the first thing. And let's see if we can. So we get completions on the title, but what's a name that's more annoying to type? Let's see. So the original title. So these keywords at this point, they don't exist anywhere statically, right? They're not in the file. They're just coming into a runtime from this endpoint. And it can be really helpful to get completions like this when we're exploring an API. All right. And furthermore, I'd like to see what, let's explore this a bit more, kind of what titles we have. The first sneaked in here. Cool, let's see this a bit. Let's maybe also sort this. So cool, and here's actually my favorite film. Where is it? Totoro. So, and I think I want to write a function now where I'm going to give it a title and it's going to return me the info for this film. All right, and here I'm going to start with the let binding again. Later it will become a function. I'll set this title. And then I'll kind of, so let's see, this works, and then kind of filter. Right, I'm getting something back. And filter the first. Right, so this is the info for tutorial. So this is the function body I have here that kind of does what I want. So now finally I'm gonna refactor this into a function. So call this fetch film, remove this here, right, and call it afterwards, and yeah, it's still doing what I want. And what I like to do is use these kind of ignore reader macro to have the function invocation afterwards. You can also use a comment form, but I like how it's visually, kind of my editor is graying this out and acts as a nice visual separation. All right, but I think I want to refactor this function a bit. And for this, there's another trick I'd recommend. Like I used to do it that I would change the body and then cursor down again and then run it again, and still, if I'm still getting what I expect. But what I like to do today is wrap this in a do block, so I can effectively use the eval top level key binding, and I don't need to cursor around as I'm changing it. And what I'd actually like to do is, I think I want to introduce a top level var that kind of goes from title to the info of the film. And so we're gonna map this. So we want from title to identity. Right, this looks good. Right, so when we get the keys, these are all the titles. And give this a name. And then we can actually kind of use, like, rewrite this to be just title. Run it again. Yeah, we're still getting what we want. Still the tutorial. Good. So to explore some more, let's see kind of what are the people that appear in this film. And we see this gives us just this list of URLs we want to hit again. So let's fetch them. Okay, now this is actually taking quite some time, right? Because we're now doing multiple HTTP requests. But yeah, the second time again, it's instant because it's memoized. And now we're also starting to get into the territory, like if I run this with Babashka, it's, yeah, like we're starting to get some significant runtime now. Like it's running at 2 seconds, but yeah, this is still a pretty simple example, right? So yeah, 2 seconds versus a few milliseconds. All right, and then let's see, what are these, what are the names? Okay, let's also sort them. Then you see here the cat buzz is the first person that appears in this film. If you take anything away from this talk, check out the cat buzz if you don't know it. And lastly, I think I want to kind of write some hiccup and see if we can display this info in the browser. And there I want to start. Let's start with a function. Again, going to use the kind of let binding trick. So my info is this, and want to turn this into hiccup. So we want kind of a list element, then an h1 of the title. That looks good. Add its description. No. And also, and it still runs. And let's add an image with the image of this. Oops. Yep, that looks good. So then again, time to turn this into a function. Right? So this is, or let's just call it kind of toHiccup. Takes the info. Let's try it. Looks good. So then when we just get the whole films and map over them, and then let's into a list. All right. And lastly, we probably want some outer markup. Let's see if we can turn this into HTML. That looks good again. Then kind of spit it into a file. Let's see if we can open this. What is it?
Closure Java.
Closure Java, right. So yeah, to recap, I've shown you how to start a REPL with Babashka and how two simple key bindings to eval the form at the cursor and at the top level go a long way, especially if you combine them with some tricks like wrapping things in a do or like starting a function in the let binding. And yeah, that you can also kind of use a JVM REPL, right, in place of the Babashka one. It's just more polished, I think, because it has a lot more users. And if you stick to the libraries that are in Babashka and yeah, use the same versions, I find it pretty rare that you run into semantic differences from regular closure. And yeah, I also really like this kind of when I'm working on a mixed project, like with JVM and Babashka code. Like just dealing with one REPL connection is just a lot less complex than like seeing this buffer goes to this REPL and whatnot. That I already find like too much complexity that you can't really overcome, and then you don't want to deal with it and don't do it. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Once again, open it up for questions.
Hello, I'm new to RTT, REPL developer, and I'm wondering about how do you turn that those experiments that you make into tests? Because yes, you managed to solve the problem in a few minutes, and that's awesome. But the thing is, what about later when it grows up and you want to change it? It's a very newbie question.
Yeah.
And
well,
how can you, the second part is, how you can you, or is it possible, or how, to combine RDD with TDD?
Yeah, it's possible, but it's not the preferred way I like to work. Like for me, I'm using tests more as a tool to lock down the code after it does what I want. And when I don't use it as a design tool, like people do, like with test-driven development more in the like Ruby community, for example. But for a lot of stuff, I also leave in production code these invocation snippets like right below my functions. And so whenever I'm touching them, I'm really like working with this super local scope. But yeah, you can, of course, like it's trivial to do the stuff what I showed, also take some concrete invocations and then turn them into tests after it does, yeah. And when you do this, when it already does what you want it to do, then yeah, the REPL also really helps you to paste in your assertions and then wrap it in a test or is equals and
I just wanted to make a comment on the last question. If there is a space between REPL-based development and test-driven development, which is to do exactly what Martin does, and at the beginning you just write def test is equal, then colon foo, and you do exactly what Martin does, and when you like the answer, you just copy the result of whatever you have there into the foo, and then you have your test.
Yeah.
So this is how I like to work. Thank you so much.
Maybe no microphone. What's your favorite Ghibli movie?
Sorry?
Your favorite Ghibli movie?
Yeah, Totoro would be my favorite, yeah.
Everybody hear that?
And it's safe to see with children, I would say.
Yes. That's how I gotten to know it, yeah. But there's also it was something about 4 adults in it, I think, yeah.
So it looks like we are at the end of the question section.